Hey everyone, my name is Scruffy. Today we are looking into the next dungeon of the War Within, the Rookery. If you want to check out the full playlist, like for dungeon guides and raid guides, please make sure to check out my YouTube channel. For all other written guides like class guides and delve guides, you can check out yourmmo.com. If you like these type of guides, and maybe even guides for Path of Exile, I would really appreciate if you could consider hitting that sub button. And without wasting more of your time, let's hop into the Rookery. On your way to the first boss, you will encounter several mobs. Cursed Rook Guards attack the tank with Crackling Crush, dealing a fancy amount of damage. Cursed Thunderer cast Lightning Bolt on random players, but mostly just attack the tank with regular auto attacks. Quartermaster Gorran uses Entropy Shield in a random direction, blocking all attacks from players coming out of that direction. Position yourself behind him while he channels this. Bounding Void are shooting 3 projectiles in a random direction, indicated by the mini-boss's direction he faces, which also travel back to him afterwards. Cursed Rook Tender will use Enraged Rook to buff nearby Unruly Storm Rooks. Unruly Storm Rooks themselves cast Thunderstrike at the location of a random player, a swirl that detonates after a few seconds and dealing damage to players struck by it. Energized Barrage is a frontal cone, aimed towards a player, and you surely want to turn this away from your teammates if you are targeted. Void Rider's Charged Bombardment is a charge, who would have thought, in the direction of a random player, dealing damage to player in its path and leaving more swirls on the floor that detonate for more damage. Localized Storm is a channel cast that deals damage to players throughout its cast time and cannot even be interrupted. First boss is Kyrioss. Kyrioss launches Chain Lightning that jumps over to 3 players, dealing nature damage. Lightning Dash creates a swirl on the location of a random player, and as soon as his cast finishes, he charges to that location, dealing damage in a 12-yard radius. You can already tell we're gonna see a lot of swirls in this dungeon. Kyrioss creates more little swirls that are just regular swirls dealing damage on impact, similar to the last boss in Knockout Offensive. Upon reaching 100 energy, Kyrioss flies to the center of the room and unleashes 4 beams that rotate in a circle across the area. Players getting hit by it take most likely deadly damage. And in Mythic, Kyrioss applies Unstable Charge on a random player, and upon expiration it deals heavy damage to all players. To avoid your party to take too much damage from that, players have to jump down in the middle area and explode in there. After the first boss, we all jump into the middle and glide down to the bottom. Besides the Cursed Rook Guards and Cursed Thunderer that you already know, Corrupted Oracle uses Seeping Corruption, a curse on a random player for 6 seconds that spawns a swirl underneath that player every 2 seconds. And as per usual, this deals damage to players struck. Void Shell applies a damage absorb shield on all nearby enemies, absorbing damage and reflecting damage back. Coalescing Diffuser uses Attracting Shadows, pulling all players towards it and dealing heavy damage at the end of the cast. Arcing Void deals damage to the tank, but also to other close by players like melees, so make sure to spread 6 yards away or interrupt this cast. Void Cursed Crusher use Implosion on the current tank, dealing damage to them and spawn a Voidstone that pulls players inside that are too close to it before it then explodes. And after killing a bunch of these packs, make sure to kill the last pack before the door to open it. Second boss is Stormguard Gorran. Stormguard Gorran targets a random player and marks his location as the impact of his leap. As like the 20th time in this dungeon, if you are caught in the swirl on impact, you take damage. This also leaves a Voidstone on that location for 1 minute, and also shoots laser beams in several directions, dealing damage to players struck. The boss will also frequently pull all players towards him with Dark Gravity, dealing deadly damage to players within that 10 yard of the boss. Chaotic Corruption is the main mechanic of this fight. The boss will apply a debuff with 4 stacks on a random player. This player then explodes for damage within 6 yards around himself, and then his debuff jumps over to the closest player. The damage taken from this debuff is increased by 100% afterwards with Chaotic Vulnerability, so players have to juggle this debuff and never let the same player get it again. After this encounter, you're already on your way to the last boss. Void Fragments jump around and cast Crushing Darkness. Once again a swirl, detonating, player damage struck, you already know. They also cast Void Bolt on random players. Void Descendant casts Void Volley, which you should make sure to interrupt. Radiating Voidstone grants himself Embrace the Void, absorbing damage and pulsating damage in the meantime. You can also sometimes use your extra button, stunning enemies in the targeted area. This will also be a boss mechanic. Defeat a mix of all these mobs, especially the ones on the last port, to trigger the last boss. Tanks need to turn away the Voidstone monstrosity due to his Oblivion Wave ability. This is a frontal beam in the direction of a tank. Unleash Corruption is a debuff on several random players, detonating after a few seconds in a 10-yard radius. This will spawn Void Chunks. These adds have to be killed within 15 seconds, otherwise they respawn as an ad that pulsates heavy damage to players over time. Null Upheaval is a large party-wide damage that knocks all players away from the boss. This spawns several swirls for players to dodge, but also some permanent Void Zones. To destroy these Void Zones, the friendly NPC will grant a random player that extra button again that can be used on these Void Zones to clear them. Last is the Void Shell. Void Shell causes the boss to absorb 20% of its health. When the shield is broken, the friendly NPC will use Storm Vengeance to deal 20% damage to the boss and stunning him for 10 seconds. This also spawns more Void Chunks that have to be killed immediately. And of course, as a stationary boss, if there's no player in melee range, he's gonna cast something to try to wipe your party.